I want to tell you the story of a man by the name of Harold Moore Jr. Harold Moore Jr. was a native of Houston, Texas. When he finished high school, he matriculated to Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I currently serve as president. He was a very active student, but he also served as a United Methodist minister as a student. Active on campus, joined a fraternity in 1967. In 1970, before he left Dillard and eventually graduated from Pepperdine University, he joined the Nation of Islam. He became one of the disciples of Minister Louis Farrakhan. His name then changed. Mr. Farrakhan gave him the name Khalid. And by the mid-1980s, he was now known as Khalid Muhammad. Khalid Muhammad was a dynamic speaker, but said a lot of incendiary things and caused a lot of chaos wherever he went. Some of his offensive remarks were really geared toward whites, Jews, and gays. He was most famous for a speech he gave at Keene College at the time, which is now Keene University in New Jersey, where he called Jews bloodsuckers and honkies. And he called the Pope a no-good cracker. If you are familiar with the hip-hop group Public Enemy, there is a song called Night of the Living Bassheads from the album It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, 1988. And in the beginning of that, and you can listen to it later, you will hear a voice that is Khalid Muhammad. Have you forgotten that we were brought here? We were robbed of our names, robbed of our language. We lost our religion, our culture, and our God. And many of us, by the way we act, we even lost our minds. This was Khalid Muhammad. Well, why am I telling you this story of a man who generated a lot of concern? Pressure, even within the African-American community, was on Minister Farrakhan to censure him after those remarks at Keene. And when he eventually died of a heart attack, Dwayne Wickham, an African-American writer for USA Today, in an op-ed entitled Death of Black Bigot Ends Life of Hatred, he called him the alter ego of the Grand Dragon, the flip side of Bull Connor. This story is important because I began my higher ed career as coordinator of Greek life at Emory University in Atlanta, where I'm from. In 1993, the Black Student Alliance for Black History Month in January or February 1994 invited one Khalid Muhammad. There was a lot of pressure. Anybody here from Emory? Georgia, okay, I got my PhD from Georgia State. We count that. Okay. Georgia State count. Okay, so I got the Atlanta people here too. Okay. So there was a lot of concern. Emory has a very diverse population, including a large Jewish population. There was lots of calls and pressure on the president of the institution to cancel Khalid Muhammad's appearance. Black Student Alliance was, no, we want this to happen. We paid for it. The university stepped in, canceled his appearance. Created a lot of tension on campus. Black students marched on campus. That April, we had a Black Student Summit where all of the high, upper-level administrators, me as one of the few African-American administrators, spent a day talking with Black students to figure out how we would move forward as Emory University. So that sort of sets my perspective as to where it is now, because I felt like it was wrong for Emory to cancel that appearance. And as a college president who really believes in bringing a diversity of ideas to campus, I've done that now I'm in my 13th year as a college president. And I've been the president of 2 historically Black institutions. So as a part of my lecture series, the one at Philander Smith was called Bless the Mic, because I am the hip hop president. I will always be the hip hop president. And at Dillard University, we call it brain food. So within that time, I've had very conservative speakers like Ann Coulter, Ward Connerly, Charles Murray, Jason Riley, Rich Lowry, and Mary Madeline. And I've had your left speakers, Michael Eric Dyson, Al Sharpton, Tim Wise, Father Michael Flager, Roland Martin, and James Carville, all as a part of that campus experience. But as I wrote in an article, which is the title of this lecture tonight, I don't know if we can do that as much today because there's a lot of pushback when we have those kinds of speakers. And so here are the 4 questions I want to ask you and get you to think about. Question number 1, who decides which speech is permissible? Who makes that decision? Very recently on our campus, and the precursor for all of the things that have happened on college campuses this year, because when you read a lot of these articles and they talk about, the things that happened at Texas A&M and at Middlebury and at Cal Berkeley, where my mom went to school, Dillard never really makes the list because we were sort of the precursor of everything that happened. Because you see, in November, we were the site of a debate for candidates running to be senator for the state of Louisiana. And one of the people who made the debate that was hosted by Raycom, we just rented out our space like George Mason rented out this space tonight. We rented out a space. And as a part of that process, one of the people who some kind of way made the debate was former Grand Dragon of the KKK, David Duke. So, of course, the headline writes itself. Former Klan leader speaks at historically black college. That's a big national story. I was in Washington, D.C. Rachel Maddow was talking about it. My phone started blowing up. Dude, y'all got who coming to your... I'm like, I didn't invite David Duke. That's not... But it was a lot... There was a lot of concern on the campus, and one of our students, Mariah Hickman, who was here, was... you were secretary of SGA. Secretary of SGA this past year. So she got to see it up close and personal. And when we had outside people come in and people were upset, and I was trying to get back to campus because I had to pick up my kids and wait for the babysitter. And Mariah sent me an email. She was like, I wouldn't even come up here. These people don't even know what they're debating about. So it was a lot of concern about that, but people said that it wasn't permissible for a man with those views to even participate in the debate. And I'm like, well, who decides that? The state of Louisiana decided that he was eligible to run for Senate. The state of Louisiana also decided that he was eligible to serve in the U.S. Congress representing the state of Louisiana. The state also allowed him to run for governor when he got over 35% of the vote. So now he can't participate in the debate. As I told people earlier this week, it's a damn debate. People are supposed to argue with each other. So why do you want not have that perspective as a part of it? So question number 1 is, who decides which speech is unsuitable? Who decides which speech is permissible? Question number 2, do we obsess over speech but ignore acts? The most controversial speaker that I brought to Dillard was Corinne Steffens. Anybody know who Corinne Steffens is? Raise your hand if you know who Corinne Steffens is. I see just a few. Corinne Steffens wrote a tell-all book in 2005 about being a video vixen. And so she talked about being on the set of the videos, dancing in the videos, and all the stars that she slept with. So it had shockwaves through the hip-hop community because she was naming names. And that's the first time that had happened, that she took some kind of agency to say, oh, I'm about to tell everything. And it wasn't like she glorified herself. She, in all of her books, she talked about, I got some issues with myself, and so I allowed myself to be passed around from man to man as a part of this experience. And there were people who were really upset about it. And I had some alums saying, how could you have a person like that speaking on our campus? And I was reminding them that in July of 2006, right after Hurricane Katrina, at our first commencement back on campus, the commencement speaker was one William Cosby. After allegations started leaking out about the stuff that Cosby had been doing, for which he is on trial right now. So we're more upset about the woman who wrote a book saying what she did voluntarily than the man who now has been charged with sexual offenses of dozens of women, Or as I tell people like this, we had a petition that about 200 people signed saying, don't have Corinne Steffen speak on our campus. To this date, I've only had one alumnus say we should rescind the honorary degree we gave Cosby in 2006. So why are we more concerned about certain things being said versus what people actually do? I mean, most recently, I don't know if you've been following the flap with Bill Maher. I watch Bill Maher a lot. And so when I was watching him last Friday and he slipped into the N-word, I was like, oh, you about to get it. People about to lose their mind. And so for the last few days, people were just like, his show should be canceled because he used the word and not at someone. He used it referencing himself. And I'm like, so we cancel Bill Maher's show, but nobody still wants to talk about Chris Brown beating Rihanna. We're dealing with politics of respectability and different actions for different people. Or we aren't talking about R. Kelly and all the stuff that R. Kelly did. R. Kelly's about to come to New Orleans. There's going to be people all up in that place when he comes. And R. Kelly is foul. R. Kelly is foul. But we're more upset about Bill Maher using the N-word in 5 seconds than all the stuff that R. Kelly has done. So that's the second question. Why are we sometimes obsessing over speech versus acts, and we ignore those acts? Number 3, is there a value to hearing the other side? I met a student who says she's interested in being an attorney. I'm sure there are a number of you. How many of you are interested in becoming an attorney? Okay, there are a lot of you. I'm married to an attorney, okay, who has been texting me. I really want to text her back. I wait because she went to Starbucks to see if I could get something when I came home. Like, y'all stop and get a brother something to eat when I come. So I need to have some dessert when I get back. My side job is I'm an expert witness in hazing cases. I've done more expert witness work than anybody in the country, and there's all kinds of groups, not just historically black groups. Most of the expert witness cases I've done have been for NIC groups. As a part of the process, when I'm working on a case, I'm given my files, I study everything that happens. After we get into it a little deeper, there's a time when I am going to be deposed. When I am being deposed, the party that is being sued has their attorney come meet with me. It usually takes about a day or so. And they ask me all kinds of questions to try to figure out if we go to trial and they put me on the stand, what position am I going to take? Because none of you ever wants to deal with an attorney who will go into a court for you and they don't know what the other people are going to say. They would never do that. That's malpractice, not to even know. So that's the part of the process. You have to understand the other side. You have to understand the differences. So when it comes to speech on campus, why is it that we don't value hearing the other side, particularly of those of you who want to be attorneys, because your job will be to listen to the other side. You cannot do your job if you don't do it. So why not practice it now? And finally, do we infantilize the college experience arguing that some voices should not be allowed on campus? A friend of mine, Andre Perry, who is an educator, wrote an op-ed recently, says, I finally agree college isn't for everyone. And this is part of what he says. He says the temptation of the argument that even hate speech should be allowed in a place of learning in the name of unfettered thought is wrongheaded because white nationalism is based on a brutal and artificial hierarchy. He wrote this in response to the recent murder of Bowie State University student Richard Collins III by a student at the University of Maryland who I believe is a self-identified white supremacist. Andre goes on to write, his murder by the hands of a white supremacist proves that there are some organizations and people who should not be welcomed to the hallowed halls of higher education. Once again, if I put on my hat as an expert witness, in the last 30 years, I could argue that college fraternities and sororities have killed more people than white supremacists on college campuses. So does that apply to them as well? That there is not a place for those groups in the hallowed halls because they could kill someone? Because that happens annually. We just had a big case at Penn State where 18 people have been arrested for hazing. We haven't had a big case where 18 white supremacists have killed someone. So if that's the standard that we're using, are we going to apply it equally. So as I close, there's two editorials a day that I'll mention. The first in the Chronicle of Higher Education, called "The New Censorship on Campus." The authors write, "It is an illusion for minority groups to believe that they can censor the speech of others today without having their own expression muzzled tomorrow." This was prophetic, that statement, and it came out this morning. They said part of the reason you shouldn't do that is that you martyr your opponents. They get larger audiences, more book sales. The only reason David Duke was even in the debate in Louisiana, he knew he was never going to be the senator. He was trying to generate his, because he's got competition now. You got Richard Spencer out there and people like that. David Duke is like, I'm trying to get back on the scene. I'm trying to ride the wave. How can I be relevant again? So it was all about free publicity for him. And when people went to protest, he was loving it. His name was in the papers for weeks because of that. So that wasn't what he tried to do. So they also argued in this piece that it might be a sign of intellectual weakness and a lack of confidence that we can't compete with those ideas. We've got to understand that you all and all of us live in a world where most 18 to 24-year-olds do not go to college. They are not in college. Only 40% are. So just to say, let's deal with this in this college experience, you are still in the minority. Why this concerns me in their statement talking about how it would have an expression being muzzled tomorrow, just this afternoon, the legislature in Louisiana has now passed a new bill to protect campus speakers. And so what it says, part of the article, is a bill aimed at preventing the disruption of campus speakers won final legislative approval Tuesday. The measure, House Bill 269, stems from controversy at the University of California, Berkeley, and elsewhere, especially episodes where conservative speakers were shouted down. The House voted 95-0 to go along with the Senate changes to the original bill. So now you have states making rules about how people will behave and what the consequences are. So now we got folks you don't want involved in this, involved in it, because sometimes we don't control ourselves. So one of the things that we might lose because of that kind of action when debate dies is the ability to think and act freely. So, backstory, the 4 questions, and we'll have a chance to engage in other questions later. Thank you.